Anastasia's search for her companions. Second Chronicle 1. In a place where the presences of many people crowded together could be felt, a precarious atmosphere began to tense over. The heightened tingling sensation felt upon the skin reflected the feelings of the participants in the tense atmosphere. Standing right in the center of that atmosphere was a tall beastman wearing a black kimono. The long arms of the beastman were bound by handcuffs, and he was surrounded by imposing men carrying swords. At a glance, the scene made it apparent that the beastman was not in the best situation. However, beastman, golly, ain't it quite over the top to have the full force of the League of Cities representatives all gathered against me. Pierced by the stinging atmosphere and gazes, the beastman in question did not pay any mind to their sharpness. If the beastman felt like it, neither the handcuffs nor the tense swordsmen would be an obstacle. That was a fact understood not just by the person himself, but by everyone else present here. That was because this beastman was the most famous being in the Kararagi city-states, stranger. Hallible, beastman. Yep, that be me. His name having been called out, the beastman, Hallible relaxed his shoulders and smiled. At Hallible's response, the person who had called out his name, one of the mayors who filled the 10 special parliamentary seats that had been prepared in the assembly hall, knitted his eyebrows, while making it apparent through the wrinkles on his brow that he thought Hallible's attitude lacked seriousness. One of the mayors. Actin' so flippantly, would it be wrong to suppose Thatcha got an excuse? Hallible. An excuse, I wonder what be good to say here. Another one of the mayors. Without hidden nothin', speak of absolutely everything you got up your sleeve. If you don't, you ain't gonna be able to convince us. After all, it was 2,000 people. Hallible. Yet another one of the mayors. The annihilation of a town inhabited by 2,000 people, no matter how much of a pillar Hallible hand may be to the city-states, we ain't gonna be able to ignore this level of damage. Taking turns, the mayors cast their voices towards Hallible, and the instant that the specific scale of damages was touched upon, the dry atmosphere of the assembly hall tensed up even more. 2,000 people, that was the number of casualties from the most recent disaster. It was the kind of statistic that would only ever emerge in the case of a large famine, natural disaster, or civil war, but this event was none of those. Those 2,000 people were casualties that had been brought about by none other than the individual known as Hallible. One of the mayors. Do ya remember what our request was, Hallible Han? Hallible. What was it now, I wonder? Probably 'cause of my age recently, I've been forgettin' a bunch of important things. Stuff like where I'd placed my kaisru before I went to bed. One of the mayors. It was to investigate the unusual occurrence at Nanoyu, the town sittin' long the border with the empire. Ignoring Hallible as he tilted his head and feigned ignorance with his answer, the conversation continued matter-of-factly. One of the mayors, with fingers as thick as hornworms, as he narrowed his droopy eyes. One of the mayors, investigatin' the strange occurrence that essentially means searchin' for the truth and solution to the problem at hand. Get it? You completely ignored that, and instead entirely wiped out all 2,000 inhabitants of the town. While maintaining a composed voice, there was an intense indignation housed within. The man was performing a strict interrogation, but he did not receive any reprimanding response from his surroundings. It was customary for such a conference to get the briefing out of the way first, and then to proceed accordingly from there. In the Kararagi city-states, the parliamentary system of mayor representatives from each city was a tradition dating back to the era of their founding father, Hashin. But somewhere along the line, the system had been reduced to a mere formality. Hashin loved discussions, and it is said that he desired a parliamentary system in which differing opinions would clash and produce a conclusion that would not have come about from a lone individual. However, the current parliamentary system of mayors would head towards a predetermined conclusion from before the discussion had even begun, merely proceeding by tracing the form of a conference. Therefore, a conclusion had already been prepared regarding the treatment of Hallible, regardless of any excuse he might have given. One of the mayors. It'd be impossible to cover up such an outrageous story. We're aware of Hallible Hand's contributions to the city-states. Even so, stranger, can I have a quick word? Right when the discussion was about to reach its premeditated conclusion, a voice suddenly called out. At the interference that had not been present at the prior briefing, the gazes of the mayors turned to the person who had interrupted. In the corner of the assembly hall was the girl who had been permitted to listen in on this conference. However, she had only been permitted to observe, not to voice any opinions. One of the mayors, "You can't be speakin' out, Anastasia Han. I'll say this now, but you're only permitted to observe this conference 'cause of Chudenhan's influence." To impudently. "Anastasia, it ain't impudent or nothin' like that, Orgo-san. You can't be sayin' things like that. Besides," Orgo, "Anastasia, for us merchants, impudence is naturally the tool of our trade, much like how a sword would be for a swordsman." With an elegant smile, the girl gently sidestepped the words of the mayors who were over double her age. Then, stealing initiative from them, the girl stepped forward to the center of the assembly hall. Naturally, the girl's actions and appearance attracted attention. Stroking the white fox scarf wrapped around her neck, nobody stopped the kimono-clad girl as she walked in a relaxed manner. It was to the extent that even the presence of the longsword-wielding escort with his graceful facial features had disappeared from everybody's perceptions for a moment. "Halibal, Lil Anna, this ain't no playground for children, you know," Halibal calmly called out to the girl who had stepped forth. More so than his responses to the mayors, he used a tone of voice that was, to put it frankly, tender, harboring a clear warmth. At Halibal's words, the girl, Anastasia, closed one of her pale turquoise eyes and ignored him. Ignoring him, as Anastasia looked around at all of the mayors present in the assembly hall, Anastasia. "Excuse the hurried greetings. I'm Anastasia Hoshin, representative of the Hoshin Company. Thanks to the kindness of Orgo-san over there, I've been allowed to sit in on this conference, but I've become a lil unable to just shut up and watch." Orgo, "What are you, Anastasia? Look, Halibal's a careless, impolite, and hopeless loose liver. Even so, he's got strength and popularity, so I get why y'all mayors dislike his company." But, pausing her words there, Anastasia opened her previously closed eye and gazed at the mayors with both of her eyes. Within the gaze of her round irises, the expressions and shoulders of the mayors stiffened. It was as if they had remembered the fact that, as the head of a company who still had youthfulness in her face, she was the representative of a large company that vied for the position of first or second within Kararagi. As those mayors stood at the ready, Anastasia made a declaration without changing her expression. "Anastasia, you can't be misjudging the reality of the situation. It's the teachin' of Hoshin to seize all the opportunities for business and for victory. In order to solve this problem, don't you think that you gotta put your displeasure with Halibal aside for a bit?" Quietly and gently, Anastasia's words dominated the assembly hall. No, to be precise, it was Anastasia's overwhelming presence that dominated the assembly hall. Next to Anastasia, with the attention having been taken off of himself, Halibal gave a comment. "Halibal, Lil Anna, it hurts my feelin's when you talk 'bout me like that." Then, while gnawing on the kaisru he had taken out, after having removed his handcuffs without anybody noticing, he grumbled so. 2. The closure of the national border between the Kararagi city-states and the Valatian Empire. In a position of wanting to hasten to enter the empire, this was certainly not a situation she found to be acceptable. In order to remove that issue, or perhaps to deal with it, Anastasia and Julius had wedged their way into the conference of the mayors. As a result, while they had made a mess of the conference, they were able to get them to listen to what they had to say. Julius, "Even so, a strange occurrence concerning the residents of Nanoyu, 2,000 people, was it?" Anastasia, "According to what Halibal said, it ain't got nothing to do with an epidemic or curse arts. Either of those would have been a huge problem, but it's also a huge problem that it wasn't either of them." Seeing his lovely master place a finger over her lips, frowning in rumination, Julius narrowed his eyes. In terms of her demeanor from earlier at the assembly hall, Anastasia's mannerisms entranced people. As expected, having displayed her true talent at such a location, she was the woman whom Julius backed for the royal throne. Anastasia, "How are you, Julius? Tell me now, did you happen to think of something?" Julius, "My apologies, nothing that is for certain, only." Anastasia, "Only." Julius, "In the past, I recall reading about a case that bore quite a resemblance. When asked for his opinion, Julius searched around his own memories for an answer. Before Anastasia, deep with curiosity as she was, what Julius remembered was from within history books documenting the demi-human war, a small detail that was only slightly touched upon. The greatest civil war in the kingdom's history, it was spoken of by many in a historical or gruesome sense, and though that one account essentially only amounted to being touched on, Julius, it is said that amidst the events of the Civil War, the most unsightly battle was brought about through magic that controlled the dead. Stranger, the dead, I see. Certainly, that can be interpreted as coinciding with Hallibel's testimony. Responding to Julius's report, as the tone of his voice lowered, was not Anastasia, but rather the spirit around her neck covered in soft fur, Echidna. The assent of an individual like her was reassuring, and Anastasia also nodded, "That's right," without objection. Anastasia. They had bad complexions and their blood wasn't flowin'. Hallibel said something like, "Livin' corpses were walkin' around, so I guess that's exactly what it was." Although, Julius, 2,000 people, that is a vast difference in scale. At Anastasia's identification, Julius touched the white scar under his left eye in agreement. Though the accounts in the history books were few, and the events of those days were not clear, Anastasia's view was correct. In the battle that utilized the dead in the demi-human war, based on the way they were being controlled, the number would not have been so high. Here, it was 2,000 people. Even if there was a technique to control the remains of the dead, to actually implement that, and to go so far as to have them enact the form of a regular town, was devoid of sanity. The competency, talent, and above all, the concept of the magic made Julius think so. Stranger. "Oh, didn't know y'all were over here." Turning around towards that aloof voice, Julius slightly raised his eyebrows. The one who had spoken was a tall wolfman of black fur, Hallibel. He was the one held at Speardip at the assembly hall earlier, but Julius could not avoid feeling tense at his calm demeanor. After all, he was none other than the strongest shinobi of the Kararagi city-states, said to stand shoulder to shoulder with the likes of Reinhard. He was one of the strongest warriors of the 4 great countries. However, contrary to the tension of Julius, Anastasia spoke. "What?" While she turned a suspicious look to Hallibel as he approached them, Anastasia. "Why, Ha in handcuffs and Bane accompanied by guards. It's terrifying, for a large criminal to have been set free." "Hallibel, wasn't it Lil Anna who asked that I be released? Shouldn't you be glad that I've been set free? Come on now, why don't I raise you up in my arms like I used Ta do back in the good old days?" Anastasia. "'Cause I'm already a grown woman. We ain't that close." As Hallibel reached his hands out towards her, Anastasia bluntly slapped them down. Even towards that cold attitude, Hallibel reacted cheerfully. Witnessing the exchange between the two, Julius blinked his eyes. He had heard that they had known each other for a long time. So he had heard, but they were far closer with each other than he had expected. Hallibel, "Hey, Oni-Isen over there must be tough Bane Lil Anna's guard, ain't it? After all, she's a lass who seems to have a curious soul, always scamperin' about here and there." Julius. "I consider that to be one of Anastasia-sama's many charms." Hallibel Dono, allow me to introduce myself once more. I am Julius Juculius. Hallibel. "Stuff like Dono, it's all right even if you don't use such a formal way of callin' me. You can just call me Hallibel." Julius. "That is," Hallibel, "I don't mind. Or rather, I'd actually be more comfortable that way. It's quite tiresome to always be treated like I'm super important or incredible after all." As Hallibel spoke to him with a carefree smile, Julius hesitantly nodded. He had not expected to receive such a request from the most powerful warrior of the city-states. But therein, Julius felt something akin to the power of Anastasia's fate. The right person in the right place would naturally have their life intersect with such things. Anyhow, Julius. "So then, what of the mayors?" Hallibel. "After chassin' me and Lil Anna out, they're in the midst of conversin' without any nuisances. That said, you don't gotta worry. They ain't so thick-headed that they wouldn't be able to recognize that persuasive power of what Lil Anna said." Echidna. "With that, it all depends on the extent to which they follow through on Anna's request." As Echidna made that remark, having received the words of Hallibel, who was shrugging his shoulders, the shinobi in question reacted with an "oh." and jerking his face towards the fox scarf Hallible. What's this? Have you finally given up on keepin' your mouth shut? Echidna. From your reaction, were you perhaps already aware of my presence? Hallible. Look, it's my job to be perceivin' these kind of things. Since it didn't particularly look like you were doin' anythin' bad ta lil Anna, I just thought that maybe you were a lil bit shy. As the kaisru in his mouth bobbed up and down, Hallible answered so, to which Echidna heaved a sigh. It had been spoken like it was nothing special, but Echidna's camouflage was not something that could have been easily perceived. It was the type of invisibility that neither Julius, Ricardo, nor Mimi and the others had been able to realize over many years. Julius, I understand that you have known Anastasia Sama for 10 years now. That you've known her for 10 years, but what sort of time was that? Hallible. Oh, stories of the good old days. Well, Ricardo's kinda like a brother Tommy, and he brought Lil Anna jeepers. Lil Anna, please stop givin' me that look. As Julius carefully selected his manner of verbal expression, Hallible tried to start speaking of some old reminiscences, but he was silenced by Anastasia's gaze. Julius found this to be unfortunate at heart, and as Hallible whispered another time to him, Hallible, even so, it's quite unusual for you to be this impatient. Is there someone you care about that much in the Empire? Anastasia. MPH, what do you mean? Hallible. Ain't no use in playin' dumb. Mackin' such a passionate speech at the Assembly Hall, suggestin' that you take me along to go to the Empire as emissaries. Something like that ain't for the sake of Kararagi, nor is it for your own sake. Anastasia. Hallible, in a way that's typical of Lil Anna. You rationalized it with this and that, but your real intention's something else. But since the feelin' that you didn't want to miss the business opportunity seemed so desperate, I thought that it might have been for somebody else's sake. Am I right? Bending his tall body at the waist, Hallible asked this as he gazed into Anastasia's face. With a sidelong glance to Anastasia as she remained silent, Julius stepped forward in order to defend her. There was no strong reason to keep it a secret, but if it was something that Anastasia did not wish to disclose, Julius would stand up for her. At Julius's movement, Hallible lowered the ends of his eyebrows, wondering if he had gone too far. But, Anastasia, someone whom I'm indebted to might be in danger. And I'm worried about my friend. Anastasia, hiding behind Julius's back and not showing her face, spoke so to Hallible. What sort of face Anastasia was making, that was something which Julius, who was protecting her with his back, did not know. Hallible, too, was likely unable to see her face, as she was pressing her forehead against Julius's back. The person whom Anastasia said she was indebted to would have been Subaru, and the person whom she called her friend would have been Hallible. As ever, you're quite skilled at getting me motivated. What a naughty girl. Julius's quiet conviction and Hallible's warmth-filled voice occurred at the same time. At that response, Julius understood that Hallible, much like himself, was also someone who had been charmed by Anastasia's humanity. Stranger, the conference has reached a conclusion. Return inside. Then, one of the guards from the assembly hall called out to Julius and the others. The discussion between the mayors, it was about the plan Anastasia had suggested in order to enter the Empire. The duty of secret messengers to offer relief to the Valatian Empire from the Kararagi city-states. If the situation was as they had predicted, and the disaster of the dead was also befalling the Empire, they would need support. Anastasia. Shall we head in, Julius Hallible? I'll be sure to work both of you hard after all. Saying that and removing her forehead from Julius's back, Anastasia stepped forth. She was already back to being her usual self, so her previous statement was indistinguishable from a strategic move to inspire motivation within Hallible and to have him accompany her. Echidna, she is not that clever of a girl, you know. Hallible. After all, she's got some surprisingly cute aspects to her. At Julius's speculation, Echidna and Hallible answered so one after the other Anastasia. Don't be saying any unnecessary things. Hurry up and get movin'. Time is money, as Hoshin says. Hastened by an angry Anastasia, Julius exchanged wry smiles with Hallible and Echidna as one of the people who surrounded her, and stepped forward. Not towards the assembly hall, but in order to proceed towards the Empire, he took a step forward. And,